Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Friday, May 17th, 2013. I'm Darko. I'm ready to go here. Mass executions in Syria in the name of Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. So al-Nusra Front militants executed 3 Syrians set here in Syria because they supported the Syrian regime. A video published over the internet showed a mass militant reading a statement in the name of the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant before executing the men before a crowd screaming Allahu Akbar. So it says here that the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which to me doesn't have much credit, showed militants in the east of the country executing civilians because they supported the Syrian regime. The video showed at least 9 blindfolded men were kneeling in front of this individual, I guess the leader, facing the camera with 2 black, I guess, al-Qaeda flags behind them. It says here, al-Nusra Front's Sharia court has in the eastern area of Deir Ezzor, near the Iraq border, has sentenced these soldiers to death because of their massacres against our people in Syria. It says the man then took a pistol and shot the prisoners one by one. And kind of a follow-up story, terrorists kill Syrian troops, summary style video shows. In the video, the terrorist executing the soldiers is speaking with a Saudi accent. So it says here, Syria rebel Heart Eater says ready to face trial if Assad does. A Syrian rebel commander who rose to international notoriety for footage of him cutting out and eating the organ of a slain soldier, and he was willing to face trial for his actions if Assad was also sent to court. So the recent footage supposedly showed one of these guys cutting out an organ. They said that this individual, Hamad, believed that he was eating the man's liver, but a surgeon who saw the video said the organ was actually his lung. Syrian opposition considers sacking its U.S.-backed interim leader. The fractured Syrian opposition movement is considering ditching its prime minister at the meeting next week. This says actions that would complicate the State Department's push for peace talks and once again leave the international community without a clear idea who would take charge if Assad falls. It's like I said before, I don't think they really care if it just descends into chaos like Libya. Under the black flag, who knows, maybe they'll get like a Karzai or a similar type governed Maliki in Iraq, kind of a controlled leader. Under the black flag of al-Qaeda, the Syrian city ruled by gang of extremists. So we already covered that article the other day. Just thought I'd throw it in there. The UN says 3 peacekeepers were abducted between Israel and Syria. This is like the 3rd time. This is from Thursday, yesterday. Armed men broke into the UN outpost in a buffer zone separating Israel and Syria and abducted 3 UN military observers. So they say the latest abduction is a very serious incident that illustrates the very difficult conditions that now prevail in and around the area separating Syria and Israeli forces. And, that's why you have Turkey's leader Erdogan with Obama getting together, trying to figure out what's going on. It's basically both of these leaders are both kind of have showed their asses recently. Erdogan, Turkey with explosions, and then of course Obama with all this other stuff, the IRS and that, Guantanamo Bay. Says here the Prime Minister of Turkey said on Friday that it would be up to the UN Security Council to decide whether to establish a no-fly zone inside Syria, and said that they backed the involvement of Russia and China in the peace talks. Torture evidence found in Syrian prisons. So rights activists visiting the abandoned government prisons in the first Syrian city to come under rebel control have found torture devices and other evidence that detainees were abused there. So they always say it happens on both sides, which it probably does. But this article is going to completely ignore the UN, basically these rebels, these people that are supposedly being tortured by the Assad government, abducting UN workers, peacekeepers for the 3rd time, cutting out hearts or organs of people, carrying out chemical attacks, blowing up civilians around schools and that. I want to know where the Human Rights Watch is when that stuff is going on. West backs militants in Syria despite crimes, says Iran's MP. So he said despite frequent revelations about the crimes by terrorists in Syria, the Western countries and their allies persist in providing the terrorists with military logistic training and financial support. He said that terrorists have resorted to psychological warfare in a bid to cover up their failures against the Syrian army. Such incidences show the climax of hostilities committed by arrogant powers through their mercenaries in the region. Obama emphasizes military option but insists U.S. won't attack Syria alone. He reiterates demand for Assad's resignation. He reiterated that the U.S. reserves the right to attack Syria militarily despite a previous deal with Russia to pursue a negotiated settlement to the nation's ongoing civil war. He said that he would only do so as part of a broader alliance of attacking nations, saying that the U.S. had no magic formula for dealing with an extraordinarily violent and difficult situation like Syria. So the regime change plan of destabilization that came out of the Arab Spring isn't really working for them. I think there's different things going on. I think that yes, there are, obviously there's global government, but I think there's different factions, east, west, and then within each country. I think there's a little bit of stuff going on behind the scenes between Russia and the United States. Been going on for a while. And I also wonder if Obama himself is actually not doing what his masters want him to do fast enough. Like someone spoke with recently, I agree with them. I mean, you think about 6 months ago that definitely there would have been troops on the ground. Something would have went down with Syria. There's always a talk about Israel and supporting a strike on Iran, but who knows if that'll ever pan out for them. But it hasn't happened. There hasn't been troops on the ground. But yeah, it's this article, why are liberal jackals suddenly attacking Obama? So he's under attack by his own people now. They're comparing him to Nixon. So who knows, maybe that's a stab at saying that maybe they'll try to impeach him. I doubt that will happen. Or, of course, blood sacrifice, which of course would stoke a civil war, which would play into the powers that be, their hands. Israel hints at new strikes, warning Syria not to hit back. So, and a clear warning to Syria to stop the transfer of advanced weapons to the terrorists in the region. Says here, a senior Israeli official signaled on Wednesday that Israel was considering additional military strikes to prevent that from happening, and that the Syrian president would face crippling consequences if he retaliated. You talk about hypocrisy here. It says if Syrian president reacts by attacking Israel or tries to strike Israel through his terrorist proxies, he said he will risk forfeiting his regime. Qatar spends billions in Syria for influence. They pay $50,000 per dissident. A very big shocker. Qatar spent billions of dollars in the past 2 years to fund the Syrian opposition. U.S. slams Russian anti-ship missiles going to Syria. The Obama regime denounced Russia on Friday for providing Syrian President Assad's regime with anti-ship missiles, saying the weapons would only worsen a war that Washington and Moscow have been promising to work together on stopping. Well, of course, we know that they're fomenting the whole thing, have been from the start, so this is complete lies. And they're talking about denouncing these things. Again, this is like what I said. I think there are things going on behind the scenes between Russia and the United States. I think Russia at this point is saying whatever. These the U.S. and the West aren't serious about creating peace or stopping the quote violence. They're just going to keep arming the opposition. So, but it is kind of interesting. Anti-ship missiles. What are they expecting in Syria over there? Syria's civil war fueling violence in Iraq. Of course, you got to remember Russia has an interest for the port of Tartus. That's one of their few naval outposts that they have to protect. Syria's civil war fueling violence in Iraq. The prospect of regime change in Syria emboldens the border provinces. Says that tensions between Iraq's Shiite majority and its Sunni Arab minority are nothing new, but after a previous sectarian civil war broke out during the U.S. occupation, many believe the Sunnis have been beaten into virtually submission. The ongoing civil war may be doing a lot to change that. It says here is the prospect of Western-backed regime change, putting a Sunni, likely Islamist government in charge in Syria, has many in Iraq's border provinces themselves Sunni Arabs, seeing a new key ally emerge. So the State Department, U.S. State Department, has concluded that al-Qaeda in Iraq and Syria's al-Nusra are joined at the hip. They're basically the same group. They say here that al-Nusra takes more and more territory around the Iraqi and Jordanian borders. Spillover violence and armed transfer back and forth are only going to grow. Sorry about that. And if the war in Syria does get resolved with regime change, it may effectively give al-Qaeda in Iraq, a state sponsor right along the Iraq border. Over 160 killed in 3 days of Iraqi sectarian violence. Scores killed as Sunni mosque bombed. After back-to-back days of 40 or more killed in Iraq, the violence continues to rise with major attacks on Sunni mosques, killing at least 90 more people and bringing the death toll to over 160, 400 wounded. So another article is talking about al-Maliki trying to get a grip on what was going on, and that they had some failed attempts to get it under control. It says here that the sectarian violence has been a problem in Iraq since the beginning of the U.S. occupation, but after a period of relative calm, the violence began spiking again in late April when Iraqi soldiers attacked Sunni protesters in the north. 3 mass graves with 1,000 corpses found in Iraq. So officials in that country have found 3 mass graves containing the bodies of about 1,000 people thought to have been executed by U.S. soldiers during the occupation of the country. It was in the western province of Anbar. A soldier who killed fellow U.S. troops in Iraq gets life sentence. A U.S. Army sergeant was sentenced to life in prison without parole on Thursday for killing 5 fellow servicemen in a shooting spree in Iraq, one of the worst cases of violence by an American soldier against other U.S. troops. The military said the 2009 shooting might have been triggered by combat stress. Afghans tell of U.S. soldiers killing rampage. So it goes on here, and according to this individual, an American soldier wearing a helmet equipped with a flashlight burst into her 2-room mud home while everyone slept, killed her husband, punched her 7-year-old son, and shoved a pistol into the mouth of his baby brother. So there's been actually another article I just covered about special forces. Here, I'll go to the article right now. But remember this, the U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Robert Bales is the one that's accused of the killings. He was the one that actually was supposedly burnt out. But there was reports that he was not alone when he did this, carried out the massacre. And here we go. Afghans claim to have video of U.S. Special Forces guy torturing civilians. Afghan officials say they have a video of a man overseeing the torture of Afghan civilians. Exactly who ordered the man to torture is a matter of fierce dispute. I don't know. I think this is like the same article, but for some reason it's getting recycled in the news cycle. We Are Not the Dead, amazing photos of soldiers before, during, and after the war. Talking about how they look like, what they look like. And of course they kind of doctored the photos to make it look worse than what it is with the lighting. But there's no doubt that these people have been through a lot. We have here Base World. Outside the U.S., the Pentagon controls a collection of military bases unprecedented in history. So with all the U.S. troops gone from Iraq and withdrawal of Afghanistan, says it's easy to forget that we probably still have about 1,000 military bases in other people's lands. These large collections of bases receive little media attention but cost a fortune. Even when cost-cutting is a subject du jour, it still seems to get a free ride. The majority of the benefits have gone relatively to a small group of private contractors. Almost a third of the $385 billion is flowed into the coffers of just top 10 contractors, including companies like KBR, subsidiary. Terrorists given new identities allowed to board commercial flights. An investigation found that the U.S. allowed terrorists who have been given new identities after cooperating with U.S. prosecutors, probably patsies, to board commercial flights in the United States. That's good. Washington gets explicit. Its war on terror is permanent. So a senior Obama official tells the U.S. Senate the war in limitless form will continue for at least another decade. Another almost Central Asian near Russia, Uzbekistan man nabbed in Idaho over terror plot. He was charged with helping foreign terrorist organizations. So again, talking about terror proxies for countries, is this aimed at the United States? Russia says CIA crossed the line with the CIA agent who was working out of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. He was detained after being caught red-handed trying to recruit Russian intelligence officer for the CIA. Florida says to their citizens, rat out your terrorist neighbors. iWatch allows people to report terror-related activities online. Similar to this, sheriffs plan to urge people in Florida to report suspicious behavior unleashes storm of criticism and backlash. Some of these potentially dangerous situations they give are a schizophrenic person with weapons, which means a person with a weapon, a war veteran making threats to passerbys. One example are anti-government people as well. We want people to call us if the guy down the street says he hates the government, hates the mayor, he's going to shoot him. Legitimate sounding calls would trigger a visit by a specially trained deputy in plain clothes or by mental health professionals. It says want to take pictures of a federal courthouse at 3 a.m. Says this individual was bored. He drove downtown in Phoenix, began walking around snapping photos of federal courthouse. Says and end up jailed, unemployed, and homeless, and all of his equipment and that confiscated. They wanted to know if I belonged to any extremist groups like the National Socialist Movement or Sovereign Citizens. and also what type of books they checked out at the library. Israel to legalize 4 outposts already ordered for demolition and occupation, and 9 hurt in West Bank after Israelis opened fire on them. Thank you.